Elijah Ames was running late again, with his 6-year-old son tugging at his coat, and a backpack that had seen better days bouncing against his side. "Daddy, my shoe," little Elias cried, hopping on one foot in the middle of the sidewalk. Elijah dropped to his knees and fixed the laces, his fingers trembling from the cold. His coat was too thin for the February wind whipping through downtown Chicago. He glanced at his watch. He had exactly 6 minutes to get Elias to school before the doors locked, and then another 20-minute walk to make it to the diner, where he washed dishes for barely enough to survive. "Okay, bud, let's hustle." But Elias' small legs couldn't move any faster, and Elijah's heart sank when the school bell rang in the distance. They were still 3 blocks away. That's when a sleek black car pulled up beside them, silent, smooth, like it belonged in a movie. The tinted window rolled down, and a woman leaned over from the driver's seat. "Hey," she said, her voice soft but firm. "You look like you could use a ride." Elijah blinked. The woman was stunning. Dark, wavy hair tucked into a tailored coat, eyes so striking they made him forget the cold for a second. Sorry, do I know you?" "No," she said with a smile. "But I drive this way every morning and I saw you running with your son. It's freezing, let me help." He hesitated. Elias clung to him, shivering. "I promise I'm not a psycho," she added, that smile widening just enough to break through his caution. "You can sit in the back with your son, doors stay unlocked. I've been there, let me help." Elijah exhaled and nodded. "All right." The car's interior smelled like vanilla and leather. As soon as he shut the door, warmth surrounded them. Elias sighed in relief, curling into his dad's side. "Where to?" she asked, glancing at them through the rearview mirror. "Westfield Elementary, 2 more blocks." She nodded and pulled into the street with practiced ease. "I'm Naomi Ellis," she said casually, "and you are?" "Elijah Ames, and this is Elias." Naomi looked at Elias through the mirror. "Hey there, Elias, cool backpack." "It has dinosaurs," Elias mumbled sleepily. "I love dinosaurs," she replied, her voice softening. By the time they pulled up in front of the school, Elijah was still processing how surreal it all was. Naomi had driven like she didn't have a care in the world, in a car that probably cost more than his yearly rent. "I can drop you at your work too," she offered. He hesitated. "You don't have to." "I know," she said, cutting him off gently, "but I want to." He gave her the address, and she drove in silence for a moment. "You got anyone helping you out?" she asked. "I mean, raising a kid alone, that's a lot." Elijah looked down at his hands. "No, his mom left when he was 2, it's just the 2 of us." Naomi didn't say anything, but her knuckles tightened on the steering wheel. When she pulled up to the alley behind the diner, Elijah turned to her. "Thank you," he said sincerely. "I don't know how to." "Don't," she said quickly. "I'm not doing this for a thank you, just let me help again sometime." He studied her face. It was too kind, too calm. People didn't do things like this, not for strangers. "You sure you don't want something in return?" Naomi met his gaze. "I don't need anything, except maybe seeing you smile a little more." He chuckled under his breath, lips twitching. "That's a tall order." "I'm patient," she said. And she was gone. Naomi Ellis drove away, gripping her steering wheel tighter than she should have. Her driver was going to freak out when he realized she took the Bentley out herself again, but she didn't care. She couldn't stop thinking about Elijah's eyes, tired, guarded, but full of a quiet strength. And Elias, clutching his dad's coat like it was the only safe place in the world. She'd recognized that look. She'd lived it. What Elijah didn't know was that she owned the building his diner sat in, and the high-rise next to it, and the one across the street. Naomi Ellis wasn't just some kind stranger. She was a billionaire. One Forbes had labeled the quiet heiress. But this wasn't about pity. It wasn't even about charity. It was about him. She had no idea why he got under her skin like this. Maybe it was the way he'd looked at her, like he didn't expect anything good, or like he didn't believe someone could care without wanting something in return. She wanted to prove him wrong, and maybe, just maybe, she wanted to know what it felt like to be seen by someone who didn't know her name was attached to a fortune. The next morning, Elijah stepped outside with Elias bundled up beside him, and there she was again. Same car, same smile. "Figured you might need a ride again," Naomi said, leaning her elbow against the window. Elijah hesitated. "You don't give up, do you?" "Nope." He tried to keep his expression neutral, but the truth was, he'd barely slept. He'd been thinking about her all night, the way her voice sounded, the way she looked at Elias like he mattered. He opened the door. "All right, but this doesn't make us friends." "Sure," she said, that teasing smile back. "You can keep telling yourself that." Elias beamed from the backseat. "You came back." "I said I would," Naomi said gently. "You ready for school?" "Yes." Elijah watched them in silence. His chest tightened. He didn't trust easily, but something about Naomi made him feel like he could breathe again. Like maybe, for the first time in a long time, someone saw him not just the guy scrubbing dishes and counting change, but him. After she dropped them off again, Naomi stepped out of the car this time. She handed Elijah a coffee, real coffee, hot and rich-smelling, not the watery diner kind. "I have a meeting nearby," she lied. "Thought I'd walk with you." Elijah narrowed his eyes. "You always this persistent." "I told you," she said, stepping beside him. "I'm patient." He shook his head, chuckling. "You're something else." And for the first time in a very long time, Elijah Ames smiled. Elijah brushed flour from his hands and stepped out of the kitchen, wiping his palms on his apron. The lunch rush had left the place a wreck, and the dishwasher was backed up again. He tugged at the knot in his neck, muscles aching from hours of scrubbing, when a familiar voice caught his attention. "2 coffees, black, and a slice of cherry pie if it's fresh." He looked up, heart jolting. Naomi stood at the counter, her hair pulled back in a loose twist, a gray wool coat cinched at her waist. She didn't glance in his direction right away, instead scanning the laminated menu like she hadn't already memorized it. Her presence didn't belong in this place tile cracked along the edges, fluorescent lights buzzing faintly overhead, but there she stood, like it was the most natural thing in the world. "You're a long way from wherever you usually get lunch," Elijah said, stepping toward the counter. Naomi turned to him, her eyes lighting up. "I was in the neighborhood." He raised an eyebrow. "You just happened to be on this block during your lunch hour." "I make time for things that matter." His chest tightened, but before he could respond, the waitress behind the counter nodded toward the kitchen. "Elijah, dishwasher's jammed again." He sighed, "Be right back." Naomi slid onto a stool at the counter, watching him disappear behind the swinging doors. A few minutes later, he returned, damp sleeves rolled up to his elbows. He looked exhausted. "You really don't get a break, do you?" Naomi asked. "Not one that lasts more than 5 minutes." She pushed one of the coffees toward him. "Then take 4. He hesitated, then sat beside her. The warmth from the mug seeped into his fingers. "You didn't have to come here," he said. "I know, that's why I did." He studied her closely. There was something deliberate in the way she held herself, like she was used to being in control but didn't want to show it. She wasn't trying to impress anyone, but everything about her still managed to command attention. "Why are you really here?" he asked. Naomi took a sip before answering. "Because I wanted to see how you looked when you're not freezing on a sidewalk." His laugh caught him off guard, a low, rough sound he hadn't heard from himself in weeks. "You don't give up easy." "I don't see the point in pretending I'm not curious." He leaned back slightly. "Curious about what?" You, she said simply. You have this way about you, like the world's thrown everything at you and you're still standing. Elijah looked down at the table. Standing doesn't mean I'm not barely hanging on. I didn't say it was easy. He glanced up, and for a second, their eyes held. There was something unspoken there, an understanding neither of them dared to name. You always this direct? He asked. Only when it counts. Before he could reply, his phone buzzed. He pulled it out, frowning. Elias's teacher. Naomi watched as his eyes scanned the screen. Everything okay? She asked. He stood abruptly. He's not feeling well, said he's got a fever. Naomi was already on her feet. I'll take you. You don't have to. I want to. She didn't wait for him to argue. They left the diner together, and by the time they reached the curb, her car was already pulling up, summoned by a quick call she'd made while he was reading the message. Inside the car, Elijah sat rigid, worry etched into every line of his face. He doesn't get sick often, he muttered. Naomi didn't prod. She just sat beside him, quiet but solid. When they reached the school, he was out of the car before it had fully stopped. She followed, keeping her distance. Elias was waiting in the nurse's office, cheeks flushed and eyes glassy. Elijah knelt beside him. Hey, buddy, let's get you home. Naomi watched the interaction silently. The way Elijah's entire focus shifted to his son, it struck her in a place she hadn't expected. There was no hesitation in how he scooped him up, no resentment in his tone, just complete, unwavering love. Back in the car, Elias curled into his father's chest, his breath shallow but even. I can drop you at a pharmacy, Naomi offered softly, or your place, whatever you need. Elijah looked at her, exhaustion battling gratitude in his expression. Pharmacy first. Can't afford to skip the medicine. She nodded, already giving the driver directions. They pulled up to a small corner pharmacy. Naomi stayed in the car with Elias while Elijah ran inside, returning minutes later with a small bag clutched in one hand. I'll walk from here, he said as they approached his building, a narrow brick structure with peeling paint along the trim. I'll help you get him upstairs, Naomi replied, already unbuckling her seatbelt. Inside, the apartment was small, clean, but worn. Naomi carefully pulled Elias's shoes off while Elijah fetched a damp cloth for his forehead. This isn't your responsibility, Elijah said, not unkindly, as he joined her in the living room. Naomi met his gaze. You're not a burden. He sat on the edge of the couch, head in his hands. I wasn't supposed to need help. I was supposed to do this on my own. Maybe you were never meant to, she said quietly. He looked up. What does that mean? She hesitated, then stepped closer. It means maybe there's more to life than surviving. Maybe someone wants to stand with you, not because you're weak, but because you're worth standing beside. He didn't reply, couldn't. Naomi moved toward the door. I'll give you space, but if you need anything you call me. I don't have your number. She scribbled it on the back of a receipt and handed it to him. Now you do. Then she was gone, leaving behind the scent of her perfume and the sound of something shifting quietly, powerfully between them. Elijah stood at the sink, rinsing out the cloth he'd been using to cool Elias's fevered forehead. The apartment was dim, afternoon light filtering in through the blinds, casting long shadows over the worn floor. Elias had finally dozed off on the couch, a soft rise and fall in his chest the only sign of peace after a long, restless night. The knock at the door was soft but certain. Elijah dried his hands on the edge of his shirt and opened it cautiously. Naomi stood there, holding a paper bag and a cautious expression. I brought soup. He stepped aside without a word, motioning her in. She crossed the threshold quietly, her boots barely making a sound against the floor. I made it myself, she said, placing the bag on the tiny kitchen counter. Well, technically, I supervised someone making it, but I chopped the celery. Elijah raised an eyebrow. You cook. I can follow directions and not burn things, which, in my world, is a win. He gave a quiet laugh, the kind that barely reached his eyes. She didn't press him. Naomi glanced toward the living room. How's he doing? Better than last night, still warm but not scary warm. He leaned against the wall, arms crossed. He asked if you were coming back. I'm glad I didn't disappoint. You didn't, but you didn't have to. I know, she said, but I wanted to. Elijah looked away, jaw tightening. Naomi took her coat off and folded it over the back of a chair. You want me to leave? No, he said too quickly. Then more quietly, no, I don't. She nodded once, then opened the paper bag. I brought extra and some bread. I figured you haven't eaten. He didn't argue. Instead, he took 2 bowls down from the cabinet, the chipped ceramic clinking softly against the counter. She ladled the soup quietly, handing him a spoon. They sat at the table, the silence stretching between them, but it wasn't uncomfortable. Just full of things that hadn't been said yet. You don't talk much about yourself, he said, blowing over his spoon. I don't have to very often, she replied. Most people already think they know everything. What about me? What should I know? Naomi tapped the spoon against her bowl. I was raised by people who valued image more than people. My father ran a hedge fund before he died. My mother spends most of her time in other countries, pretending she's still 25. He watched her face carefully. You close with either of them. No, her voice didn't waver. I learned early how not to need anyone. He took a bite of soup, chewing thoughtfully. And now you're here, in my kitchen, with soup. Naomi met his gaze. I'm tired of pretending, don't want something real. Elijah looked down into the bowl. You don't know what you're getting into. I know exactly what I'm doing. No, he said, voice low. You don't. I'm not just a guy going through a rough patch. I've been clawing my way through the same storm for years. I don't have time for games, and I definitely don't have space for someone who's going to disappear when it gets hard. Naomi leaned forward, resting her elbows on the table. That's the thing, Elijah. I'm not going anywhere. I'm not afraid of hard. He shook his head slowly. You say that now. I mean it now, and I'll mean it tomorrow. They sat in silence again, the weight of her words settling between them. Then Elias stirred on the couch, soft sounds of waking murmurs drifting across the room. Elijah stood, setting his bowl aside. Naomi followed him into the living room. Hey, buddy, Elijah whispered, kneeling beside his son. How are you feeling? Elias blinked up at him sleepily. Thirsty. Naomi reached for the glass on the side table and handed it to him. Elijah helped him sit up just enough to drink. The boy's eyes landed on her. You're still here. She smiled. I told you I would be. Elias leaned against his father's shoulder, content. Elijah looked up at her. He doesn't let people in easy, neither do I. I know. You keep showing up. I will. He studied her, something shifting in his expression. I don't have anything to give you. Naomi crouched beside them, her gaze steady. I don't want anything from you, Elijah. I'm not here because of what you can offer. I'm here because I see you. He didn't respond, but he didn't look away either. Later, after Elias had eaten and drifted back to sleep, Elijah walked Naomi to the door. The hallway was quiet, the kind of quiet that made simple moments feel heavier than they were. She turned to him, her hand resting lightly on the frame. I'm throwing a fundraiser next week, she said carefully. It's for a children's literacy initiative. It's black tie, very polished, and completely out of your comfort zone. He raised a brow. I want you to come, she continued, as my guest. He gave her a long look. Why? Because I want you to see my world, and maybe let a little of it into yours. He hesitated. I don't own a suit. I'll take care of it. You don't need to. I want to. Elijah leaned against the doorframe. You always get what you want. Not always, she said, but I never stop trying. He nodded slowly. I'll think about it. I'll take that as progress. Naomi reached into her bag and handed him a folded card. Details are inside. Driver will be at your building, 6 sharp. Before he could object, she slipped through the door, her footsteps fading down the hall. Elijah stood there for a long moment, the card heavy in his hand. For the first time in years, the future didn't look like a tunnel, it looked like a door. One he wasn't sure he was ready to walk through. But maybe, just maybe, it was already open. The tuxedo hung on the back of Elijah's bathroom door like it didn't belong there. Like it had wandered in by accident and was waiting to be sent back to wherever it came from, the world Naomi Ellis lived in. The kind of world where people wore cufflinks and weren't worried about rent due next week. He adjusted the collar again, pulled the jacket on, and stared at himself in the mirror. He looked like a stranger. Not the man who spent his nights rinsing grease off dishes and checking Elias's forehead for fevers. Not the man who'd gone years without letting someone close. But Naomi had asked, and he'd said yes. Daddy, you look like a prince. Elijah turned, startled. Elias stood in the doorway, clutching his favorite blanket, still a little groggy but better. His cheeks weren't so pale anymore, and the sparkle was back in his eyes. Do I? Elijah asked, crouching beside him. Elias nodded solemnly. You're going to see the nice lady. I am. She's pretty. Elijah laughed under his breath. Yeah, she is. I think she likes you. Elijah touched his son's cheek gently. I think she might. Mrs. Harrow, the elderly woman across the hall who collected teacups and adored Elias, had agreed to sit with him for the evening. She arrived on time, armed with a stack of storybooks and a plate of oatmeal cookies. You go enjoy yourself, she said, waving Elijah toward the door. He'll be in bed before 9, don't worry about a thing. The car waiting outside gleamed under the streetlight, its silver finish catching the glow like moonlight. The driver opened the door without a word, and Elijah stepped in, the scent of polished leather and cedar enveloping him instantly. The building they pulled up to looked more like a crystal sculpture than a venue. Tall glass columns stretched toward the sky, and soft music drifted out into the night air as guests in gowns and tuxedos passed through the grand entrance. Inside, Elijah felt the weight of every stare. He wasn't one of them. He didn't belong here, but then he saw her. Naomi stood at the edge of the ballroom, a floor-length slate blue gown cascading around her, her hair swept back to reveal the delicate line of her jaw. She wasn't looking at anyone else, just him. Elijah, she said as he approached, her voice low and full of something warm. You came. I told you I would. Her eyes flicked over him. You look. If you say like a prince, I'm walking out of here. Naomi laughed, a real, unguarded sound. No, I was going to say you look like you on the place. I definitely don't. Not yet. She slipped her hand into his, guiding him toward the ballroom floor where a string quartet played beneath crystal chandeliers. The walls shimmered with candlelight. Waiters in white gloves moved between guests carrying silver trays, and laughter echoed through the air like it had never known hardship. Who are all these people? Elijah asked, scanning the room. Investors, philanthropists. Some of them write 6-figure checks for fun, she said lightly, but tonight they are here to listen. To what? To me, she said, and to you. He stopped to meet Naomi. I want people to know what this fundraiser is really for. Not just numbers and proposals. Real families, real lives. I didn't sign up to be a speech. I'm not asking you to speak, she said gently. Just stand with me. He looked at her hand in his. That I can do. The evening unfolded like a dream he hadn't known he was allowed to have. Naomi introduced him to people whose names he couldn't remember but whose handshakes were firm and eyes curious. They asked about Elias, about his life, and for once, Elijah didn't feel like a cautionary tale. He felt seen. Later, standing at the edge of the balcony overlooking the city, Naomi leaned her arms against the railing, her eyes on the skyline. I hated these events for a long time, she said. It always felt like everyone was pretending, but tonight, it feels different. Because you brought a dishwasher instead of a CEO. Because I brought someone who's real, she said softly. Someone who doesn't care about status or headlines, just his kid, and doing the right thing. Elijah stepped closer, the city lights flickering behind her like stars. You make it hard not to fall for you. I'm not trying to make it hard, Naomi whispered. His heart thudded. Why me? She turned to face him, her expression unreadable. Because you didn't ask me for anything, not once, because you saw me before you knew what my name meant. I still don't know what your name means. She smiled. It means, can buy a building with a phone call. But what I really want is to build something real with someone who knows what it means to fight for it. Elijah searched her eyes for doubt. There was none. I'm not perfect, he said. I mess up, get tired. I lose my temper more than I should. I'm not looking for perfect, Naomi said. I'm looking for honest. I'm looking for us. He reached for her hand, and she let him. Come home with me, he said quietly. Meet Elias again, not in a car, not in a crisis, just as someone who might be part of our life. Naomi's breath caught. Elijah, are you sure? I'm not sure what tomorrow looks like, but I know I want you in it. She nodded, eyes shining. Then yes. They left the gala early, slipping through a side exit while the music still played. The car ride back was quiet, full of anticipation. When they stepped into Elijah's apartment, Elias was asleep, tucked in with his blanket in a fortress of pillows. Naomi knelt beside the bed, brushing a strand of hair from the boy's forehead. He's beautiful, she whispered. He's everything, Elijah said. He reached for her hand again. So are you. Naomi stood, turning toward him. I never thought I'd fall in love with a man who didn't know who I was, but then again, you were never interested in the version of me everyone else saw. I saw the one who showed up, the one who stayed. I'm not going anywhere. And when Elijah kissed her finally, it wasn't stolen or rushed. It was deep and certain, the kind of kiss that answered every question lingering between them. Later, as Naomi curled beside him on the couch, her head resting against his chest and the soft hum of the city beyond the window, Elijah whispered into her hair. Do you regret picking us up that morning? She tilted her face up to meet his gaze. That morning, I thought I was helping you. And now I know you saved me. They didn't need chandeliers or ballrooms. They had each other. And for the first time in a long time, Elijah Ames wasn't surviving. He was living. With her. The morning sun poured over the city like liquid gold, slipping between the faded blinds of Elijah's apartment and washing the small living room in light. Naomi stood barefoot in the kitchen, hair still tousled from sleep, wearing one of Elijah's old shirts that hung off her shoulder. She poured pancake batter onto the skillet with a concentration that made Elijah grin from the couch. You're flipping them too early, he said, chin resting on his fist. I'm improvising. They're going to fall apart. It's symbolic, she said, arching a brow, delicate but resilient like us. He laughed, getting up to wrap his arms around her from behind. You just don't want to admit you're bad at breakfast. I'm excellent at breakfast when someone else makes it. Elias padded into the room, rubbing his eyes and yawning. It smells like pancakes and something burning. Naomi winced. That would be the symbolism. Elijah handed her the spatula. You've officially been demoted. Good, she murmured, kissing his cheek as he took over. I prefer management anyway. While Elijah cooked, Naomi sat on the floor with Elias, showing him how to fold paper airplanes. When one glided halfway across the room, Elias whooped with delight and threw his arms around her. Can you stay forever? He asked, voice muffled against her shoulder. She glanced at Elijah, his back stiffening slightly at the stove as he waited for her answer. I'd like that, she said gently, if your dad's okay with it. Elijah turned, met her eyes, and nodded. After breakfast, while Elias watched cartoons with a blanket tucked around his legs, Elijah and Naomi stepped onto the fire escape. The metal was cold beneath their feet, but the sunlight warmed their faces. I got a call this morning, Elijah said, sliding his hands into the pockets of his hoodie. Naomi leaned against the rail. Good or bad? The diner's closing next month, the owner's selling the property. Her brow furrowed. Is that why you've been so quiet? I'm not upset. Honestly, I'm relieved. I've been holding on to it because I didn't think I had choices. He turned to her, eyes steady. But now I do, because of you. Naomi shook her head. Because of us, I didn't do this alone. I've been thinking, he continued, about starting something new, a food truck maybe, something mobile. I can cook. I just never had the chance to do it full time. She smiled, then let's do it. He blinked, you'd help. I want to invest. Not because I feel sorry for you don't look at me like that, but because I believe in you, and because I know you'd do it for me. He exhaled slowly, the tension in his shoulders easing. You're serious. 100%. He hesitated. You'd be tying yourself to me, to us. I already have. This just puts wheels under it. Elijah reached for her hand, threading their fingers together. I never thought I'd find someone like you. I didn't think I'd ever let someone in like this, she whispered. But you never asked me to be anything else. You just saw me. They stayed like that for a long time, the city humming softly below them, the world finally quiet enough to let love settle in. 2 months later, the polished white food truck rolled to a stop on a bustling corner near Lincoln Park. The words E and E Eats were painted across the side in bold navy script, a nod to both Elijah and Elias. Inside, the smell of grilled cheese, roasted tomato soup, and cinnamon waffles teased the noses of a growing lunchtime crowd. Naomi stood at the window, a crisp branded apron tied over her dress, handing out orders with practiced charm. 3 apple cider slushies, she called, passing them to a group of teenagers who tipped generously and waved. Elijah flipped patties at the grill, sweat on his brow but a grin on his face. Not bad for opening week, he said. Not bad for a guy who thought he couldn't fry an egg, she teased. He leaned over and kissed her quickly. I'm better with the right partner. Elias sat at a small fold-out table nearby, selling homemade cookies and collecting quarters in a plastic jar labeled College Fund. A woman in a business suit stopped by, bought a brownie, and ruffled his hair. Naomi watched the exchange with a strange ache in her chest, joy so fierce it almost hurt. That night, after the truck was parked and Elias was fast asleep in the bed they'd added to a new apartment Naomi insisted on choosing together, Elijah lit candles on their rooftop balcony. The sky stretched above them, full of stars and possibility. She stepped into his arms, rested her head against his chest. I never imagined my life like this, she murmured. Neither did I, he said, but I want all of it with you. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, velvet box. Her breath caught, but he didn't drop to one knee he didn't need to. "I don't care about diamonds or ceremonies," he said. "I just want a promise that we do life together, all of it, me, you, Elias, as a family." Naomi opened the box. Inside was a simple gold band engraved with 3 tiny letters, E plus E plus N. She put it on without a word, eyes shining. "We already are," she said, "a family." Elijah pulled her close, and they kissed under the stars, the kind of kiss that didn't need fanfare. The kind that meant forever. The food truck expanded that year, and Elijah taught classes on weekends, small sessions at community centers, showing single parents how to cook affordable meals. Naomi launched a scholarship program for kids in underfunded neighborhoods. Elias starred in every brochure photo, grinning like he'd won the lottery. And maybe he had. Their life wasn't made of glass towers or gala nights. It was laughter over burnt pancakes, quiet mornings with coffee and cartoons, sticky fingers from cookie dough, arguments, apologies, and kisses that made up for both. It was messy, it was real. It was everything they never thought they'd have. And it was theirs, forever.